Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Child Link's April Month series dubbed Understanding Boys, Identity, Emotions, and Early Influences. My name is Daniela Arajo, and I will be taking you through tonight's program. Now, as we mark Blue Umbrella Day in April, we're creating a space for an important conversation focused on boys, their identity, their emotions, and the early influences that shape their lives. Now, for those of you who don't know, at ChildLink, we believe every child deserves to be heard, understood, and supported. Yet we find that many boys grow up without enough space to express what they feel. Tonight, I have with me guests joining Benita Harris and Diego Alfonso, who will help us to explore how boys learn what it means to be a boy, the pressure they face, and how we as caregivers and communities can better support them. Diego and Benita, I'm going to give you guys a chance to introduce yourself for the public who may not know who you guys are.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Daniela, for having us. As was mentioned, I am Diego Alfonso, and I'm a Senior Gender Affairs Officer at the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security, and my focus is on the male component within that department.
Good, yeah. Benita Harris. I'm the mother of a son who is now 50, so I spent a lot of time raising him. I also grew up with three brothers, two kind of biological. One was a cousin my mother adopted. So I've been a teacher for many years. I do some work with ChildLink from time to time, but I've spent a lot of time observing boys and being very sensitive to the things that they're sensitive about. So I'm very glad for this focus on boys because too often with the emphasis on girls, we kind of neglect attention to boys. And, boys and girls, men and women will always be reacting, responding, and relating to one another. So it's very important that we pay attention to how we raise boys.
Definitely. Speaking about raising boys, when raising a boy, what values do you think is most important when raising a boy child?
Well, I think the first thing is respect. That we have to raise boys by treating them respectfully, by treating ourselves, if you're a mother or a female caregiver, with respect. And, and if there's a partner in a position, they have to see you being treated respectfully by your partner, so that boys learn respect when it is practiced, right? And we talk about how boys learn. So boys learn by paying attention from the time they're small with the behaviors of the adults in their present, so that when we actually focus on being respectful, and what happens is boys kind of grow up knowing what respect feels like, what it smells like, what it sounds like. So you just can't teach it, you have to practice it, and they have to see it being played out. And I just want to say a little thing about respect before we move on. We look at other values, but if we look at the word respect, it is really and has spec in it. And so spec is really seeing. So when, not so much now, but it was a time when boys said, don't diss me. And this was their shorthand for don't disrespect me, because they actually were saying, you're not seeing me. You're not seeing the human being that I am. You're not, therefore, treating me with respect. So that boys who are brought up being treated respectfully actually learn to be respectful to others. So that's just one value. So as we go through, we can mention some of the other values.
Diego, how about you? What do you think, from a male, what do you think is an important value that is, vital when raising a child, a boy child?
Yes, well, incidentally, what Benita said in terms of respect is very extremely important, because how we socialize boys from young, how we parent them is extremely important. Um, Also, it is interesting to note that one of the number one emotional needs of a man is respect. And so it would be extremely important for us, therefore, to teach and inculcate in our boys to um, be respectful and be that they would ultimately be respected as well, and generally good morals. But we need to be very careful when parenting and socializing our boys, because one of the things that is extremely important in socializing boys and parenting them is that we don't make the mistake of, for example, in the ministry, we have a campaign called Share the Responsibility at Home. And very often, sometimes we parent boys different from girls. And there is a context in which that is understandable. But for example, doing chores in the home, most of the times we would delegate that to the sister, the girl in the home. And the boys would grow up thinking that maybe they're less of a male or a boy if they were sometime assigned to maybe wash wares, assist with some chores around the house. And they grow up with this sense of entitlement. And as they become adults now, they have a problem and a challenge grappling with the fact that it's okay for a male to assist around the home and do some so-called girl work, as they would say. And that actually, those kinds of principles actually teach them to be responsible, and that ultimately one day they will make someone's daughter proud of their husband, that they can say, my husband assists around the house and so on. And he appreciates that and understands that that doesn't make him less of a man or a male. And so that's one of the things we want to be conscious of, that our boys grow up being respectful and ultimately respected, and at the same time appreciate and understand the importance of sharing the responsibility at home, and not allow themselves to be influenced by society's expectations. I'm from the Gender Affairs Bureau, and so the word gender actually means the roles assigned by society to boys and to girls, or the expectations of society from boys and girls, and those expectations differ. And those expectations and roles assigned are not always necessarily healthy, because there's a pressure on boys to make them feel less masculine if they do certain things. And that's a whole different topic in terms of showing their emotions and so on. So I'll stop there for now. Yeah.
So I noticed you guys both mention respect when it comes to boys. What do you think, or when do you think a boy learns when to be a boy or how to be a boy? Because you also mentioned about boys thinking, oh, because they're not supposed to be doing certain things, or they're not allowed to, or they'd feel less than. So when or how do you think a boy knows when to be a boy or how to be a boy?
Well, first of all, I would say that this is where positive role models come in, father figures come in, and again, parenting, how we socialize boys. So the responsibility is on us as parents and as a society to break certain gender stereotypes, and to begin at their very young age to let them know it's okay for you as a young man. It's okay for you to, as we mentioned earlier as an example, do chores around the house. It's okay for you to be kind and gentle as a young man. That doesn't make you, that you do not have to buy into this concept that a male or a man has to be aggressive and violent to prove how macho or manly he is, and understand that good morals doesn't make you a weak person as a man. As a matter of fact, it makes you more of a responsible man or a young man. And so, but it all comes back to the role models, how we parent, how we socialize, and we address gender stereotypes, gender roles, and so forth.
Yeah, I think you're a boy. One of the things you ask is, when do you know you're a boy? So we know that according to laws of Guyana, anyone under 18 is a child, right? So actually, you are a boy up to age 18, right? We also know there's a lot of new neuroscience, not so new actually, it's about 10, 15 years old, which says that adolescence does not end with the teen years. Adolescence actually goes up to the mid 20s, right? So that up until the mid 20s, because that is when the prefrontal cortex, that's a part of the brain that is more judicious, actually, that works out things, it regulates behavior, right? So that, as we know, that the brain is composed of many different parts that regulate different kinds of behavior, but the prefrontal cortex is what we call the executive organ of the brain. That does not biologically develop until you are in your mid-20s. And that's why sometimes we see what we call men behaving like children or behaving like boys, because they really are still in the process of development. So one of the things that we have to bear in mind, that boyhood is an important stage of developing into manhood. And you do right by boys, and you are likely to get a good outcome in terms of a man who knows his roles. Not, and I say roles because women and men play different roles at different points in their lives. Right? But one of the things we got to be very careful if their expectations of boys that we expect them to be men or young men, and they're not at that age. They're still developing as boys. And we last week we had a Blue Umbrella celebration where there was a presentation, some research, and one of the important things is to see boyhood as a stage in development. So that's not the end. So as you know that you're building a 30-story building, you get a foundation right, you get the first floor right, you get the second floor right, you get the third floor right. So every floor, every age in the development of boyhood is important, because every succeeding age builds on what has happened before. So if you don't get it right, or if things, various kinds of traumas, prevent boys from going through a healthy stage of development in those early years, it is going to show up later on in life. So that's why it is very important that we raise boys well. We raise them, as Diego said, kindness. Right? So the way to teach boys to be kind is to be kind to them. And a lot of times we're not kind to boys. You know, we're rough with them. We believe that hitting them and humiliating them and making feel bad makes them into a man. It makes them tough, right? Those are actually beliefs that are associated with the period of enslavement and indentureship, when boy children did not really belong to their parents, so they didn't really get good parenting. So many of the parents, all of the parents actually were producing the males as slaves on the plantation system. Many of the boys or the young men who came over here during indentureship were actually, many of them had been separated from their parents, so kind of brought to a strange land, and we are now familiar because of what's happening in the world. Venezuelans, Cubans, Haitians, people from various persons are actually migrating to Ghana. So the whole question of migration and immigration and being separated from your homeland, all of that is happening now. So, it's almost as though history is kind of replaying itself in different kinds of situations. But at the same time, you have to keep remembering that the early developmental stages of boys are very important. One of the things I did and this is something maybe our audience could do who are listening to us, I asked everybody, imagine yourself a 2 or 3 year old boy, right? and I ask them to put their hands on their tummy because a lot of our feelings actually resides here. So we feel here, and then the brain interprets that feeling. And Childling's vision for children is that they grow up feeling in safe families and safe communities. So I wanted people to imagine what feeling safe felt like, say at 2 and 3. And why I said 2 and 3 is that at that age, boys are actually looking, I'm going to touch Diego's face, they're looking at the faces of their caregivers in order to pick up cues. Am I safe? Am I loved? Am I going to be taken care of? So they're actually looking at the faces of their caregivers, and they're looking at the faces of other little ones around them to determine whether they're feeling safe, where they are likely to be safe. And then I ask people to, in fact, I ask people to close their eyes, so it's important to kind of shut out everything. Imagine yourself as a boy, 8, 9, or 10. And I selected those ages because that is when we go through the grade 6 assessment. So boys are in school, there's a lot of pressure at home and in school to pass these exams. But there's no paying attention to what is going on in home, how they're feeling, if they do not as well as expected, how they would be feeling. So there's a lot of tension and emotion, plus the release of testosterone, because again, there are a lot of studies on how testosterone is released in the male body, and around puberty, there's a lot of release of testosterone. So there's a lot of stuff happening in their bodies, and if the environment in the home does not make them feel safe, if nobody's speaking to them about what is going on in their bodies and what is going on around them, right? Then they feel alone, and they don't feel as though they belong, and they're kind of trying to work out things before they actually have the brain function to figure out things, or before they even have the information to know what is happening. Because most of the information at school and at home has to do with doing well in these exams that are coming up, So our boys are particularly sensitive at that period of time. So one of the things we want, not parents, but parents and teachers, and many teachers are themselves parents, to really understand that there's a lot going on in the boy's body at various parts at various years, various stages of their boyhood development. And we have to be aware of what is happening inside at different ages. Of course, then they're 14, and then they're 16, and then they're 18. A lot of happening internally, also externally. And unless we are aware of all of these things, and we actually begin to address them lovingly, respectfully, kindly, and understand that it takes a long while to get this information across, then boys grow up feeling kind of untethered and not really knowing what is happening, not having anybody they could ask what is happening. So I say to parents, when little boys are stupidness, they're testing you. They're trying to find out whether you are willing and able to give a truthful answer to their questions. When you dismiss them or don't pay attention to them in those early years, when things start to get really serious and they have really significant questions that they need answered, they're going to decide this is not a place to go. And they may go to their friends who are as ignorant as they are, and they get a lot of misinformation. So it's going back to respect. Part of respecting boys is really to take all of their questions or their concerns seriously and give a serious, honest, and truthful response to those questions. And actually being aware that there's stuff going on inside and there's stuff going on around them that as parents and adults we need to be aware of.
Speaking on creating a safe space and being honest with young boys, what do you think healthy boyhood looks like? I'll leave this to Diego.
Yes, healthy boyhood has a lot to do with, for example, boys being in a space where they feel comfortable to express how they're feeling, hurt, disappointments, betrayal,
Yeah.
or even abused in whatever form. For us to say to boys, and it come back again to parenting and social, for us to say to boys, don't talk, left it for girls. Don't cry, that's for your sister, that's for girls. A healthy environment, a healthy space makes the young man know it's okay to express how you feel. It's okay to show your emotions. It doesn't make you any less of a young man. A healthy environment and space lets the young man know that abuse or violence or bullyism is not acceptable. It's not the way to go. That does not in any way prove your manhood or your masculinity. A healthy space and a healthy environment lets a young man know that respect is a two-way street, in as much as respect is very high in terms of the needs of a male, a man or a young man, that has to be respected, you be respectful, just how men need respect, women need respect, boys need to be respected, girls need to be respected. Those are just some of the hallmarks in which a space can be identified as a space where they can express themselves, where they can feel safe, and to know that if they're in any way feeling disrespected or even abused, it's okay to express, to talk, to seek help, and know that expressing how you feel doesn't mean you're weak or make you any less of a male.
I definitely agree, and this brings me back to when we observed the Blue Umbrella Day. There were conversations surrounding boys who experience sexual violence and abuse, and what you find is that in these conversations, not particularly within our space, but in conversations in general around the world, you find people say, "Oh no, boys don't experience this. Boys, don't go through this. It's a girl thing. It's a women thing," and we find that men struggle to express and share their experiences, to report cases as well. And while we can create this safe space, how do we as community, as people, as caregivers, as parent, create that safe space for them to come to us and say, okay, this is what I experienced, without the fear of judgment?
Go ahead.
Yeah. You see, when we talk about creating a safe space, it's partly physical, right? Because if you are uneasy or insecure in the physical space around you, and the human beings in your environment are part of the physicalities in that environment. So you want an environment where the boy or the boys, if there are several boys in a family, do not feel fear, right? That something would happen to them. Or if something does happen, because we know that things happen, that we can't take care of all problems, things do happen, then they know they can speak about what has happened. They know that they can express their fear or their concerns or any emotions surrounding what has happened, and any emotions surrounding the fact that they may happen again, right? So the boys need to feel free enough to do that. So the healthy space is physical, but it's also emotional, right? So they're actually looking to see how the beings, the adults and the other non-adults in this space, how they relate to one another. So if you grow up in an environment where there's fighting, there's abusive behavior, and abuse is not only physical abuse, but verbal abuse, sexual abuse, whatever kind of abuse, that becomes a norm. So they begin to expect that in their future relationships, and they found that that generally speaking, children, including boys who grew up in an abusive relationship, actually attracted to abusive relationships because this is their norm. They're not aware that it's possible to be in a relationship that is respectful. Or they believe that respect could be demanded. You can make somebody respect you by how you treat them. And a lot of that, one of the things they've discovered that men who are sexual abusers almost always grew up in an abusive situation, not necessarily a sexually abusive situation, but in a situation where they had no power, and those with power, and those with power, not necessarily only the parents, could be it could be any adult in the home, it could be older siblings, it could be adults in the community, where they use their power to take advantage and humiliate and bully the children. So children who grow up, they associate bullying with power, so that they know as children, as boys, they feel they have no power, or they have no power in the home, but they may have power in the community, where they're younger, more vulnerable. They may have some power in the school environment, right? So when we see bullying in the school environment, usually if you check back, those boys come from an environment where they have been bullied, or they have seen others being bullied, because they have no power, or they have been seeing others with power bullying them. And so in their developing brain, when I have power, I can enforce respect, I can demand respect, I can bully people into respecting me because this is the norm, right? So part of that healthy environment where boys grow up with, right, has to be an environment where there are going to be power differentials in any home environment, but boys must see power being used to care, to take care of, not to hurt or humiliate or disrespect or make people, or abuse or make people bad. They see power being used in positive and healing ways. And the word heal is, with the word health or healthy is related to the word heal. The word heal comes from the original word whole, being whole. And all of us, to be whole human beings, boys and girls, right, require attention both to the brain, the body, right, emotions, to what's happening inside of us, what's happening outside of us, and a sense that wherever they are, at home or in the community or in school, they are being treated as valuable and valued human beings, and people, particularly adults, go out of their way to make sure that they're safe, they're comfortable, and they're able to express their feelings. A lot of times we talk about honesty and truthfulness. But when a boy says honestly and truthfully what he feels about himself or what he feels about another, we say that's rudeness, or we say that is disrespectful. Right? So we actually have to be able to let boys understand that it's okay to express yourself, to say what is your truth, but there are ways to do it without being disrespectful. And adults have to model those behaviors so children could mirror those behaviors and repeat them.
Okay, great. Now I know that Diego has to leave us. But before you go, I want to ask you, when it comes to boys and expressing their emotions, we spoke about safe spaces, we spoke about values when raising boys and how boys recognize that how to be a boy. But before you leave, I want to ask you, how do you think parents should deal with when a boy child goes to his parent, his dad, his mother, and express his emotions? How do you think parents should deal with that?
One of the first things us parents have to be conscious of and be intentional about it, regardless of how horrifying, if I may use that word for emphasis, a child may say something to us, more so a boy, we should be very conscious of how we respond to that. Meaning, initially our first response should be to let them know, you sharing this with me, I highly commend you. I'm glad you are comfortable sharing this with me. I'm happy that you can share this with me. It may not be something I'm pleased about. It was not something you should have done. Or if it is something that happened to the child, you let the child know that was not your fault. You were the victim here. Let them know it's okay. Even if the child or the boy was not correct in doing what he came to say that he did that was wrong, let them know right away, I appreciate you sharing this with me. I'm glad you're comfortable sharing this with me. What you have done is highly commendable. Well done. And from that, then we go into, it's now a teachable moment, and we go into addressing the issue that ought not to have been, and create that environment and atmosphere where they feel comfortable knowing it's okay to speak to me as your father, as a mom, as a parent, or even a guardian, regardless of how you may be conscious that this ought not to have happened, whether the child is a victim of something or a perpetrator. But we must create that, we must be approachable as parents, regardless of what the issue is, and let them know that's okay. That's one of the things.
Ms. Benito, do you have anything to
Yeah,
add to
actually,
that?
the point that Diego made about treating it as a teachable moment, yeah, it's a very good point, because all moments with our children, particularly boy children, are teachable moments, right? So if we get an opportunity to deal with something that is negative, and we see this as an opportunity to teach, right? We can actually do quite a bit, because our children are looking to see, sometimes we forget that responsibility comes from the word response. Our children are looking at how we respond to them and to an issue. That's what teaches them about responsibility. There are times when it's appropriate to be angry, it's appropriate to feel hurt, it's appropriate to be annoyed or vexed or whatever happened. Even there's some moments when withholding the truth is also an appropriate response. But the kind of understanding when it is appropriate to do something or not do something, it's something that we learn as the years go by. You don't start off as a boy knowing those things, but you learn those things when parents use every encounter as an opportunity to teach. You teach the child because the child is looking to you to learn. So they learn from your facial expression, they learn from your tone of voice, they learn what you say, they learn what you don't say. And when this is repeated over and over again, it actually helps the child to develop the ability to separate stuff and know what is the responsible behavior in any given situation.
So we spoke about boys. We spoke about boys opening to parents
Right.
as well. But how can you tell, for instance, if a boy child
Right.
is not comfortable enough,
Right.
does not feel safe enough,
Yeah.
does not want to share what is happening,
Right.
their
Yeah.
emotions
Yeah.
to their caregiver, their
Right.
parents?
Yeah.
How can you tell that a boy child may be struggling or may be going
Right.
through something
Right.
that is not healthy?
By paying attention, right? So one of the things that as parents and adults always need is to be aware. So you are aware when your boy is opening up but vulnerable, or when the boy is closing down because he does not feel safe. So that when you are aware of the fact that there are many things that the boy is keeping to himself, and this is natural and normal, that, because, growing up as a girl with my own brothers, I was always glad I was born a girl, right? Because I could see by looking at my brothers, observing them, that there were many expectations, and the fear of rejection, the fear of hurt, actually forced them to keep many things to themselves. So as a parent and an adult teacher, this applies to teachers as well. So if you've been paying attention to your boy child, you know whether he's keeping stuff to himself, whether he's pushing stuff down. And you know, we talk about depression, and if we look at the word depressed, means to push down, right? And a lot of adult depression has to do with boys pushing down, depressing their feelings and their emotions, sometimes even depressing what they think and so you depress what you feel, and sometimes you depress by not expressing what it is you're thinking, because when you express your feelings, when you express your thoughts, many times with your feelings, you're told that, boys, what you got to do, feel sad, or why you crying, and give you something to cry about. You know how lucky you are. You got this, you got that, you got the other. So they're not allowed to express their feelings, but a lot of times they're not allowed to express their thoughts, because this may be regarded as disrespectful or abusive or rude or what have you. And so boys kind of grow up, their survival requires them to depress their thinking and to depress their feelings, right? And then that stays with them. So a lot of boyhood and early manhood is characterized by constant swallowing, depressing, biting your tongue, and not saying what you feel. And then later on, you know, quite often having spent all of boyhood, much of adolescence doing that, when they get to a period when they're really a man, right, and they now have power, they now have language, their brain is fully formed, they then, all of the things that they depressed and suppressed when they were children now begins to express itself, and it often expresses itself in negative ways because there's been no role model about how to express yourself in positive ways. Right? So going back to your early question about a healthy environment, and it must start in the home, because if the home is not healthy, the boy does not expect the community to be healthy. He does not expect the school environment to be healthy. So if the home is healthy, then there's more likelihood that that boy would look for healthy spaces in the community and healthy spaces in the school environment. And wherever we are in life, there's healthy spaces and unhealthy spaces. So what we want to do with boys is make sure that they learn and understand what a healthy face looks like, sounds like, smells like, feels like, tastes like. All of their senses are involved in determining whether a space is healthy, right? And once we have done that in the home, then wherever they are in life, they can look for healthy spaces. And as they get older, they can begin to create healthy spaces because they've grown up knowing what healthy looks like, smells like, tastes like, hears like, and actually feels like. And that's why we shouldn't hit children, because the skin is the largest organ. So the skin picks up a lot of information, and that information should be healthy and healing information that makes you feel good rather than makes you feel bad. Right? So to go back to your original point, what can parents do when boys don't open up? You recognize that the environment does not lead to them opening up, and then you now have to intervene in that that closed down environment and gently allow the boy to open up by letting him know that if he opens up, he will be safe. He will be safe. And you have to ensure that he feels safe and he expects to be safe. And that takes a while, right? Because the closing down process takes time. It happens over a period of time. So having closed down, so the 1-year-old child is very open, cries when they want to cry, or let's say a 6-month-old baby, very open. They let you know when they're hungry, they let you know when they need to be changed, they let you know they're not embarrassed by wetting their nappies, right? This is normal, right? And you see, even it's normal to actually release these feelings, either feelings of terror, feelings of sadness, feelings that you have to kind of get rid of urine from your body. It is normal to let that go where you are. And then over a period of time with potty training, you turn what is normal to what is abnormal. And then over a period of time, children learn that you don't just go where you feel like going. You go to the toilet or you indicate that you need to go, you know. So you take normal behavior, right? And then you change it. So normality actually changes over a period of time. So what we want boys to know is that, you know, it takes time to learn what to say, what not to say, what to do, what not to do. That's a point that Diego made earlier about everything is a teachable moment. Everything, instead of being a moment for hitting, for abusing, for hurting feeling, for being sharp and hard, it's a moment to show kindness, a moment to teach, right? Because you're teaching the child, and the child is learning from you how to teach others and how to teach his children.
So speaking about parents and the role parents play, and you know, we would deem some of their actions to be toxic or inappropriate when it comes to dealing with children.
Yeah.
What role do parents, mothers and fathers play in a child's emotional development,
Right.
but also in a boy's identity?
Right.
Both the male and female,
Female child.
the role models.
Right, okay. Well, the first thing is the child, their parent, has to be aware of the forces that shape them. So if you as a male parent grew up in a toxic environment where being a boy got a lot of physical or emotional abuse, being a young man or young adolescent, it means that in that part of what has shaped you, right, these negative impacts when you were growing. So part of what you have to recognize that you have been shaped in a toxic environment, and when you are aware of that, you then have to what we call detoxify, right? And you detoxify in order so that you, instead of being toxic to your son, right, you can be like a tonic to your son. You know, a lot of times we use the word toxic, not recognizing that the opposite of the word toxic is a tonic, right? So we want to be tonics to our children, but we might have grown up in a toxic environment. So the first thing is self-awareness. Then the second thing is general awareness. So you pay attention to how you are shaping and influencing your son, your daughter, and your son is looking to see how you treat your daughter. And your daughter is looking to see how you treat your son, because that is also shaping and forming their own ways of relating to the opposite gender and relating to their own gender. So they, even when you don't know you are teaching, you are teaching. Even when you don't think they are learning, they are learning. So you just make sure that what you keep putting out, that's why the word respect has re in front of it, repeatedly over and over and over and over. You know, when we do learn the times table, you don't learn it automatically the first time you see it. It's after you repeat it over and over, and then somebody asks you 6 8s, and you could come up with the answer right away because it's now embedded in your brain. In the same way, a lot of these toxic behaviors are learned in the home and then reproduced outside of the home. They learn as boys and then reproduce as men, right? So once a parent is aware of this and then brings this into being to shape their own behavior, it would then help to create a more healthy environment for the child to grow up in, even though the environment in which you grew up in was not healthy. But you got to recognize it was not healthy and that it shaped you.
All right. So I realized that you're very in-depth and very detailed with your explanations, which I really appreciate, especially for the parents who are watching and are now learning and are now trying to find ways for their children to open up. I have one final question, especially I think on behalf of parents who are watching and they're looking for that gateway to get to their children. How can caregivers, parents, and people in society in general better listen to boys and parents instead of, what do you call it, correcting them in a toxic way? How do
Right.
we better listen to our boys and, give them the opportunity to come to us? How do we create that space?
Well, the first thing is, since most children kind of grow up with siblings, so a lot of times, clearly, if you got, if you're one of 6 children, as I was, right, there's not a lot of one-on-one time. Either parent, I grew up with both parents too, could spend with you. So if life is difficult for you, and it's difficult for a lot of parents, if you have several children and every child has its different issues, one of the things I say that we speak of special needs children as though these are specific, but all children have special needs. All children have needs that are particular to them. So one of the things you can do practically is to spend one-on-one time with each child, right? And I tell my nieces and nephews and other family members who have a lot of children, say, I only had one son, so I was able to spend a lot of one-on-one time with him. And it's really quality time rather than the quantity. So whatever is the moment when you get together, just make sure that it is meaningful getting together. So you can actually spend one-on-one time with each child so you get to know that child. And you can ask the child some simple question. What makes you unhappy? What makes you happy? What makes you sad? What makes you not sad? What makes you feel good? What doesn't make you feel good? What you like about me? What you don't like about me? What you like about your dad? What you don't like about him? So you can actually begin by asking children some basic questions about their likes and dislikes and listen to them. And then you can actually share some of your own experiences with that so that they know that you too were a girl or you too were a boy, so you too were young, you too had likes and dislikes, you too found yourself in difficult situations. There were some responses of your parents that you liked, there were some responses that you didn't like. So you open up to them. So when they see you opening up and being vulnerable, you're in a sense giving them permission to open up and be vulnerable. But you can start with some questions, some gentle, simple questions. You don't start with anything to do with trauma or anything to do with sex or sexual abuse. That will come later. But you begin early, letting them know that not only they have permission to speak, but you're actually interested in learning what they're thinking and you're interested in learning what they're feeling. So something happens in the home, how did you feel about that? Big sister said such and such, how did you feel? Daddy said such and such, how did you feel? Mommy, kind of got crazy and lashed out just now, how did you feel, So when you start asking them these questions, they realize that you're interested in what they think and what they feel. And we have to separate the two because our thoughts are often different from our feelings, and our feelings inform our thinking. So it's good very early you ask children, say, well, what did you think and what did you feel, right? So we have a lot of literacy problems in Guyana, but one of the most important literacy problems we have, particularly with boys, is emotional literacy. Right? They do not know the words to describe their feelings. And that takes a long while because feelings are like green light, red light, amber light. Feelings are not good or bad. They're all important guidelines and they tell us what is going on. So spend some time with your son and daughter, right, about them putting names to their feelings and then actually sharing what they think about what they feel or what they think about what somebody said or did. So basically, you see, we don't have a lot of conversation with children. We give instructions. Don't do that, don't go there, pick up that, put down that. Instructions. We don't have conversations, right? So what it is we want to do is have some conversation where children are encouraged to speak, we listen, and then we share something that might make the child understand more about us, right? So to put it in a nutshell, fewer instructions, more conversation. More listening, less talking.
Pure instructions, more conversation,
Right.
more listening, less
Less
talking.
talking, yeah.
Ms. Benita, thank you so much for such an informative session.
Yeah.
Of course, we had Diego with us earlier, but
Yeah.
Diego had to leave
Yes,
due
yes.
to some other obligations, and that's quite okay. This
Yeah.
conversation was still very much informative.
Yeah.
So as we continue to observe Blue Umbrella Day this April, today's discussion is a reminder that supporting boys intentionally is not optional. It is essential.
Necessary,
Yes, it is necessary. Now, the way we listen to them, guide them, and make space for their emotions will shape the kind of men they become.
Right.
Thank you so much to our guests, Ms. Benita Harris and Mr. Diego Alfonso, for sharing their insights, and thank you who are watching us right now for joining us and being part of this conversation. From all of us at Child Link, thank you for joining us. Do have a good night, and we will see you next time on having more important conversations regarding children, boys, and girls.
And thank you, Daniela. Right. And I thank, in his absence, I'm thanking Diego, particularly for the point he made about treating every moment like a teachable moment. One love.
Thank you.
Good.